What's the scariest we need to leave now feeling that you've ever experienced? Years ago, I was at a club with friends when I noticed two guys at the bar quietly arguing with agitated faces. Their agitation unsettled me, so I urged my friends to leave, but they hesitated. Suddenly, I picked up my friend's girlfriend and headed for the door. She kicked and protested, but the rest of our group followed me outside, telling me to put her down. As we reached the parking lot, distant pops and screams echoed behind us. We exchanged horrified glances before sprinting to our cars. Later, the news reported it was a drug deal gone bad. No one was killed, but some were wounded, including innocent bystanders. Story 2. I was at our country house with my oldest son, his wife, and kids during a break in the storms. My son wanted to go home, but I was filled with dread and begged them to stay. They agreed. The next morning, we all headed home together. On a dark stretch of road, we saw police barricading a washed-out bridge and cranes retrieving cars. We learned several cars had driven off the bridge the night before, around 9:30 p.m., the same time my son wanted to leave. My son hugged me tightly, understanding my instincts had likely saved their lives. Story 3. I was driving home alone at 11 p.m. on a dark, foggy night along Mission Road in Fallbrook. As I rounded a bend, I felt incredibly anxious, and seconds later, a young woman jumped out of the brush, frantically waving for me to stop. She looked to be in her early 20s and a bit dirty. Despite feeling conflicted, something told me not to stop. I swerved, slowed down, and called 911. The dispatcher reassured me, saying there had been similar calls and the police hadn't found her. Weeks later, I heard about carjacking attempts in the area. I'm very relieved I trusted my instincts that night. Story 4. I was in Taco Bell with my daughter and I saw a guy come in and back out with a t-shirt over his hand. I told her to dump her tray and get moving. We went out to the car quickly and left. Found out later on the news that the guy robbed the place with the gun hiding under his t-shirt. Story 5. Years ago, before cell phones, I, female, was driving home from dropping my husband at the train at 4:30 a.m. Only me and one other car on the road. He started turning where I turned twice, so I didn't go home. I went to an all-night gas station and called the police. I gave them a description of his car. 3 weeks later, he was arrested. Turns out he was following women home and driving past their house and doubling back to them. No one had noticed his car. I'm glad I paid attention. Story 6. Surfing in southern Australia, I was with one other surfer. We chatted between sets and I learned he was a marine biologist. We were enjoying the excellent surf. After 40 minutes, he mentioned feeling watched like he was bait. Despite my reluctance, I trusted his instincts and we paddled back quickly but calmly. We walked back to the car park together, exchanged numbers, and noticed a 15-FT inflatable boat near the reef. Later, I read about fishermen in their boat. As they pulled up to check their cray pots on the beach side of the reef, they were circled twice by a great white shark that was as big as their boat. Grateful, I messaged him, realizing he likely saved me from a terrifying experience. Story 7. When I was 12, I loved spending Thursday nights at my grandma's house. One Thursday, I felt something was off and asked to stay home instead. My parents reluctantly agreed. That night, I heard my mom repeatedly saying my dad's name with a hint of panic. Sneaking out, I saw my dad snoring loudly on the couch, but my mom couldn't wake him up. Ignoring her command to go back to bed, I called 911 and explained the situation. It turned out my dad had taken a bottle of diazepam in an attempt to unalive himself. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital, and I realized that my decision to stay home that night likely saved his life. Story 8. When I was around 12, my mom left to run errands, leaving me alone. Soon after, the doorbell rang, which was unusual since we lived on a hill with only 2 reclusive neighbors. I looked out discreetly and saw a young man I didn't recognize. Something felt off, so I ignored him. He lingered and started smoking, making me scared. I hid, planning to wait for my mom. Suddenly, my mom came home, asking if I was okay. She had felt an urgent to go home impulse before even starting her errands. She confronted the man, who muttered something about looking for someone, and she told him to leave. To this day, I don't know what he wanted or how my mom knew to come home, but I'm very grateful she did. Story 9. At the state fair with my mom and best friend, we, both girl, were checking out the rides and games when a creepy guy and his blonde girlfriend approached us, claiming to be modeling agents. They seemed off and sleazy, and the girl gave me the creeps. I pretended to see my mom signaling us and quickly dragged my friend away. A few days later, we heard news and school rumors about 2 girls who were kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered at the fair, just hours after we were there. The creepy couple turned out to be serial killers. Story 10. At a family reunion at a county park by a small lake, about 30 of us gathered for a BBQ. As a storm approached, we moved everything inside and planned to wait it out. But something felt wrong. An intense sense of dread overcame me. I told my wife to take our daughter to the car. My brother-in-law noticed my panic, and I started yelling for everyone to leave. Although it wasn't raining yet, I was terrified. As I got to the car, tornado sirens blared loudly. Everyone rushed out, kids crying, and across the lake, I saw a funnel cloud. We all fled. Later, we learned the building was completely destroyed by an EF3 tornado. Thank God my instinct to leave saved us. That's all the stories for this episode. I think we can say, just trust your gut feeling, especially if it feels urgent or dangerous. Who knows? Maybe it could save our lives or the lives of our loved ones. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.